Good morning. This is called This Is Now Bridge to a Better World. I'm Teresa Mitchell. Ani is still out of the country helping her folks, and we see some light at the end of the tunnel with that situation. But I'll just get down to what I intended to say today, and that is that Don Trump's invocation of the Alien Enemies Act is, of course, illegal. Since the US is not at war, this is an obvious point, but it doesn't seem to be repeated much in the press. But so long as fools abide by its powers, literally any group can be designated as alien enemies as long as a non war is a war, if you follow me. If words aren't words, why should any other particular word have meaning? And as long as the public fails to notice his deportations or gross violations of habeas corpus, at the least, the most basic law and check on dictators is gone. We're in the era of disappearances. Now, this was true, ironically, of El Salvador in the 1980s, where people were taken away by death squads or just killed in their homes by death squads. And I remember reading about that and actually meeting some Salvadorans in the 1980s and thinking, "Oh my God, I hope that I never live in a place that horrible." Let me briefly explain why habeas corpus, or have the body, is an important concept and basis for law. From the Library of Congress, which Musk seems to have not gotten around to taking off the internet as of yesterday. In the year 1215, 810 years ago, King John's Magna Carta guaranteed to all free men immunity from legal imprisonment, a guarantee that has traditionally been invoked by way of the writ of habeas corpus. By the way, King John was not down with it, and it took a sudden convocation of sword-bearing nobles to push it through. Under the concept of habeas corpus, in Anglo-American jurisprudence, persons who are deprived of their liberty have the right to challenge the legality of their arrest or detention through a judicial inquiry. Habeas corpus is a Latin phrase meaning produce the body. By means of the writ of habeas corpus, a court may order the state to produce the body or hand over a prisoner so that it might review the legality of the prisoner's detention. At the barest minimum, it has meant identifying that person. The Trump administration has not done that. They have grabbed hundreds of people and taken them away. They have sent them to a horrible place. They have set up very Nazi-like cameras to record the whole event. Dozens of cameras, if you'll notice from the propaganda videos. And it's a pretty slickly produced thing, too. Although King John's Magna Carta, going back to the Library of Congress, did not guarantee protection from unlawful imprisonment, it did not establish a process by which a person might sue for his freedom. The association between the Magna Carta's protection and the writ of habeas corpus only took root in the 17th century following the conflict between the House of Commons and King Charles I. Chuck I, after which the writ of habeas corpus became one of the most important privileges associated with English liberties. It was reaffirmed in the Habeas Corpus Acts of 1640 and 1679 and appears frequently in discussions of constitutional rights throughout the era leading to American independence from Britain. It is one of the fundamental liberties mentioned in the body of the United States Constitution. So that's 1789, and really only just 236 years of habeas corpus hereabouts, if that makes anything better. So, when Trump Tater told ICE to grab people, call them Tren de Aragua terrorists, and disappear them nameless off to a secretive prison in the lovely paradise of El Salvador, he violated habeas corpus in a really vicious manner, and not just for the brown and mostly tattooed men, or we think they're men, but for everyone. And of course, his minions began to idiotically repeat that only liberals would wring their heart's blood out over these frightening monster brown gang people. Never mind that rights for all means rights for all. If the least of us do not have rights, then none of us have rights. So long as MAGA says someone is bad, you're supposed to think without really thinking, well, they must be bad, and so who cares about these niceties of law? And it helps the psychological impact that so many of these guys have tattooed their faces. Boo! It's one of the more ridiculous and transparent tropes of the MAGA 2025 Reich that somehow the nation with the most prisoners in the world, the USA, with 1.8 million prisoners, is somehow stunted in its ability to arrest and charge people. The idea is that if our poor, oppressed, underfunded police could just do their work and get rid of that pesky, pesky law and order, by golly, we could have some real law and order around here, or something of that odor. Naturally, brown tattooed Venezuelan maybe and accused of terrorism doesn't cover all that many people. And the whole idea here is to frighten all of us, me and you, into worrying that we could be next if we don't just fucking shut up and get back to work. So it is that we also have the story of the nice Canadian lady and the innocent German man and several others also dragged through the GEO prison hell, with Kafka's ghost writing the script of their terrifying and confusing experience. Yes, they were led out of the airport in chains. Remember that Trump video saying the full body chains were so pleasing to them that they were ASMR? And they were held for weeks without any clue or anyone to talk to. So maybe you're thinking you shouldn't have clicked on this fire breathing video in case you have to go through customs yourself with this link on your phone. And maybe it's easier for someone like me related to attorneys who would doubtless be snarking at the guards the whole time if dragged off of the airport and relentlessly recording every punch for the lawsuit to go off in public about how bad things have become. Well, maybe you're right. And there's white privilege too. And maybe it's we privileged white people who have to stand up first against all this. And when I say all this, I am not describing a mere change of presidency. Don't let anyone tell you that. Presidents in the former USA were executors. They were in the executive branch, exerting the power of law while constrained by the power of law. Dictators, on the other hand, exert power without check and rely on lackeys and terror to get whatever they want while terrorizing the population. Presidents get voted out. If you don't like a president, you build popular consensus for the next election. Dictators can only be overthrown. Know any dictators? Anyone seen a dictator sliming around here anywhere? Gee, what a civics lesson we've been getting lately. Could it be that someone, maybe Fox News, failed to mention useful and basic things to their eager viewers over the years, like Marbury v. Madison and habeas corpus? Well, it seems a lot of people are getting up to speed on those concepts now. And that's a good thing because Trump and his head-nodding simians seem to think that they have a mandate to ignore judicial review. All those smashed up and non-functioning and semi-functioning agencies, which I'll remind you include 9,000 John Hopkins scientists, the annual vaccine review, air traffic controllers, nuclear weapons safety specialists, the Veterans Administration, and fucking Social Security, were never game for any incoming administration ever. They were established by law. Congress makes laws. As you'll recall, they were funded by Congress, which had the power of the purse, and the courts have been pointing out that Trump is acting in bad faith, at the very least, by smashing them rather than facilitating them per Article 1. And I'm not interested in these niceties about, oh, well, maybe he can just reduce 90% of the funding. That's bad faith. That is not faithfully executing the laws. As if all this were not frightening and humiliating enough, we are facing the defilement of every major U.S. ally with tariffs and threats of invasion. I'm going to assume I don't have to explain to anyone with a heart and soul why that is unbearable, putrescent, and horrifying. Here we are, Americans who have been known around this globe for a great many things, good and bad, now known mostly for stabbing our friends in the back without provocation. I come to you then with the very worst news of all, and I'll repeat, we have a dictator, and we must overthrow him. Impeachment was tried and failed due to his numerous lackeys in Congress, but that was back while he was still more or less a president. No U.S. president has ever been impeached and convicted, with the closest being Nixon once his own party soured on him. But that was a different era. This dictator has been convicted of felonies and impeached twice and even led an insurrection against Congress, making him ineligible for power per Amendment 14, Section 3. But his billionaire oligarchs are marching on. And there's the rub. Destroying the dictatorship means confronting corporate America in a way that most Americans have yet to imagine. It could be swift and peaceful, like the fall of the secret police in East Germany, or it could be 1789 all over again in France. So you have to decide for yourself which side you're going to be on. And those of you thinking you're not taking a side, you're taking the side of the oligarchy, because there is only one meaning to meekly arriving to your workplace without exception during these times, without saying a word, as the USA turns into North Korea. Major demonstrations are planned across the USA April 5th. Go to Reddit at r50501 for details. Of course, the protests are building, and that demonstration will build to others until we reach the general strike point, which is the only peaceful way I can think of for now to overthrow the dictatorship. We need to think ahead. For example, to ask ourselves whether we want a caretaker government after purging the insurrectionists per Amendment 14, Section 3, or whether we want first in history snap elections in the United States under international Supervision. International supervision has got to be an essential part of all future elections in any event. And that is what I had to say. Thank you for tuning in. Once again, my name is Teresa Mitchell. This is called This Is Now a Bridge to a Better World. I will be back at some point soon. My love goes out to you and to all the ships at sea.